All right, the next thing we're going to be talking about is font properties, and this is basically how you can format your words and letters. You'll spend a lot of time fine-tuning the color, the size, the fonts that you're actually using on your web page, but with CSS you can also apply additional common text formatting properties like bold and italics, as well as some less common ones like small caps and letter spacing. When you are looking at a web page in a web browser, display type inside of a italicized or an M tag, it automatically creates italicized type. And if you have type that's inside of a strong or a B or a TH tag, a table header, then all those tags appear as bold type, and that's actually true for headline tags as well. You can control these settings yourself either by turning them on or off using font style and font weight properties, or you can create additional styles that you could apply to something else to take advantage of these. So let's talk about that first. The first thing I want to do is just introduce you to the file that we're going to be working with. Basically, I have a web page that is here's my code view right here, and it basically is just pretty standard. It doesn't have any CSS in there. I have, of course, my blank CSS tags waiting for me to input CSS into this particular page, and then I just have some H3 tags and paragraph tags and some block quote syntax. So if we look at this in the browser, it basically looks like this. Here's my H3 paragraph, and then I'm using block quote to just indent some of this right here. And this kind of talks about what we'll be discussing in this particular lecture movie. So let's start by working with font style. I'm going to go ahead and just define some global styles for my web page to start off with. So I'm going to go ahead and actually assign some styles to the body tag. You can actually apply styles to the body, and of course that is going to basically affect every single tag, everything that's in the body. So it doesn't matter if it's a headline tag or a paragraph or italicized, it's going to affect everything unless you have specifically created a style that is set to overwrite that. So you can definitely use that to your advantage because it's a quick way. Like if I want all of the fonts to display as Verdana or a sans serif, I can go ahead and I can specify that right here. So if we save and we reload in the browser, you can see that now all of the font settings, no matter what they are, paragraph, H3, or block quote, they all get set to Verdana. So that's kind of a quick, fast way that you can apply a style, to something particular. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead so we can discern what's going on this page a little bit, is I'm going to create a unique style for my H3 tag. I also want to show you here that if I go ahead and I specify a font family that is different from what I specified above in the body tag, I can go ahead and I can take advantage of overriding that. So for H3, let's go ahead and let's set the font family to Georgia. I will also set the background color of the H3 tag, and we'll set it just to a gray color. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to set the actual color of the text, and let's go ahead and let's set that to a blue color. So I have that set. I'm going to save and we'll refresh in the browser, and you can see that now here is my Verdana sans serif font, but up here in my H3 tags they've all been set to Georgia serif, and then of course they have the background color in the blue just to break up our text. So this is very useful to be able to assign some sort of property value to the body tag, so you can definitely take advantage of that. And then because of the cascade, if there is a tag that is closer, like the H3 obviously is closer to this text than body, it's going to overwrite that. So that's what we're doing there. So the first thing that we're talking about is font style, and basically font style property defines that the font be displayed in one of three ways: normal, italic, or oblique. And oblique basically is a lot like italic. It's basically slanted. There's not really too much difference between oblique and italic. Supposedly, italic is simply a distortion applied to a regular font to make it lean to the right, whereas oblique font is actually designed as a font in its own right and should be more pure. Unfortunately, these subtleties don't really, display very well on the web. If you compare oblique and italic, you're pretty much going to always see the same thing. So oblique is kind of like a null point, but it is part of the font style values that you have available. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take this first sentence and I'm going to apply an example of font style. I'll be using classes, so let's just set up our CSS style here first. So I'm going to just call my class dot italic, and I'll open close my curly brace like we've done before, and then I'm going to go ahead and specify font dash style, and the value of course is going to be italic. And now I need to come down here, and this is the paragraph that I actually want to apply this to. So I'm going to come inside the p tag right there, and I'm going to type class, and then I'm going to go ahead and set the class equal to my italic class that I just created. And that means that this paragraph is going to be affected by this class. So if we save and we refresh in the browser, you can see that now this paragraph has been set to italic. And just so you can see it, if I do change this to oblique instead of italic and save and we refresh, you're not going to see any difference at all. So basically they do the same thing. I pretty much just always use italic instead of just messing with oblique, but either way they'll do the same thing. So that is your font style settings. And then of course if something was set to italic and you wanted it to be unitalicized, you could set the font style back to normal to get it to be regular text. The next property that we're going to be talking about is font variant, and the font variant property determines if the font is displayed in normal, like we're looking at the text right now, or in small caps. Small caps are displayed when all the letters of a word are in capitals, and uppercase characters are going to be slightly larger than lowercase characters. Later versions of CSS may support additional variants such as condensed, expanded, small cap numerals, and other custom variants, but at this point those things are not really supported by any of the browsers. So we're just going to concentrate on things that are actually supported right now. So let's go ahead and set up an example of our font variant. So I'm going to come back here and I'm going to make a new style. We'll call this one dot small caps because it's going to be a class. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in and I'm going to type font dash variant colon, and I'll set it to small dash caps semicolon. And then of course I need to apply this somewhere down in my web page, so we'll just go ahead and we'll apply it to this paragraph that is talking about the font variant. So once again I'm going to go ahead and create a class, and then within the quotes I'll say the name of the class that I want to call, which in this case is small caps. If we refresh this in the browser, you can see that now it displays this text as small caps. You can see that the T is slightly larger than the rest of the caps, and that's exactly the way it should work. Font variant can definitely be an interesting touch, but consider using it sparingly because text that is in all uppercase is definitely more difficult to read. It lacks the visual clues provided by the ascenders and descenders of lowercase type. It definitely would not be a good idea to use, small caps in large blocks of text. All right, the next thing that we're going to be talking about is font weight. And font weight property is basically used to specify the weight of a font. You have quite a few possible values: normal, bold, bolder, lighter, and then numeric values that range from 100 to 900. This sounds, really quite intriguing when you start to think about it. The only problem is that it doesn't always render very well in the browser. supposedly, like if you had a weight of 400 versus 300, it should be a little bit more bold than 300. But as you'll see, and I'll show you an example in just a moment, that this doesn't really always work. So let's go ahead and let's create our classes, and then we'll go ahead and talk about it. So I'm going to come up here, and I'm going to start by just creating something that I know will work, which is going to be using just standard bold. So I'm just going to call this class .bold, and you can see I'm getting pretty creative with my naming conventions that I'm using here, but might as well just keep it simple. So I'm going to go ahead and specify that the font weight, and I suppose it would be helpful if I spelled that right, font weight would be set to bold, and then I'm going to come down here into the actual body copy, and when we're talking about font weight, I will go ahead and I'll apply the class of bold that we just created. Let's save the page and let's refresh, and you can see that now this text shows as bold. So let's go ahead and let's talk about some of these other values that you might want to go ahead and put into your file. Instead of creating a bunch of different classes for all of these, I'm just going to go ahead and copy paste, since you don't need to watch me type all this, but basically I'm just going to go ahead and create a class that is based on all of the possible values for font weight. So I have a bolder, the font weight is set to bolder. I have a lighter, the font weight is set to lighter. This is font weight of 100, font weight 200, etc. So you can see that I've just pasted a bunch of classes in there, and I just already went ahead and set those up. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to apply those classes to the areas of text that basically talk about this, what we're discussing right now. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to, once again, just copy this. I'm going to highlight all of this text right here that basically gives you the options of the possible values, and I'm just going to paste in, and this is just so we don't have to type this all in, but it's the same exact thing that we've been doing up over here, except I'm using the span tag because I want to go ahead and specify that this particular text, bold, take on an attribute of being bold, and because this isn't attached to a particular tag like our paragraph is up here, I have to use the span tag. Remember, that's our kind of null tag that we can use, a generic tag, so we can call things out. So you can see that around each of the pieces of text that describe this possible value, I've just inserted the span tag and assigned the class to the appropriate CSS style that we created. So I'm going to save, and I'm going to refresh, and you'll notice that basically bold and bolder look exactly the same, and I've tested this in multiple browsers and it never seems to look any different. Lighter looks the same as normal. 100 through 500 look exactly the same, they look just like normal, and 600 through 900 look exactly like bold. So basically the end point is that you're not going to get much mileage from this 100 to 900. I would just stick with the normal or bold, because they're the only ones that really seem to do anything here. But as I said, I've tested this in pretty much all of the browsers that are being used today, and I've never seen a difference. So for now, I would just skip these settings. It is possible that eventually the browsers will support this and will have more custom control over how much bolding we can give something, which could definitely be kind of interesting. We do usually talk about, or speaking about font properties, font size, but I'm actually going to discuss font size in its own separate lecture movie, because there is so much that kind of goes on with font size. So we'll go ahead and we'll discuss that later, and that's why I've specifically left it off of this particular lecture file. The last thing that I want to talk about is the font property shorthand, which isn't necessarily a separate property, but it is a way that it's like a shortcut that will let you apply all of the font properties in a single declaration. So this can certainly help you reduce the amount of CSS that you have to write, and you can achieve results that you want, and it's kind of like a little shortcut. And if you guys haven't realized yet, I definitely am into shortcuts. So when you do these shortcuts, you need to remember these two simple rules. Values for font size and font family must always be declared. So you can't not declare font family or font size. They are a must. And the sequence of values needs to basically follow the following: font weight, font style, or font variant. Those three can be in any order. Then font size, and then font family. You always end with font family, and that's preceded by font size. So keep that in mind if you're going to go ahead and use the font property shorthand. Let's go ahead and let's assign or create a style that is taking advantage of this so we can see it in action. I am going to go ahead and I am going to create a new class, and this one I'm just going to call kitchen sink, since I'm basically going to throw just about everything that we've discussed so far into this style. When you're going to go ahead and apply the font property shorthand, you're just going to go ahead and type font right here as the property that you want to specify, colon, and then you'll go ahead and you'll begin by specifying. So we're going to put bold, then I'm going to type italic, and you don't separate these by semicolons or commas or anything that you normally would. So you just basically start to type whatever it is that you're interested in applying, small caps. Okay, so there basically I have my font size, my I'm sorry, not my font size and font family, we're going to do those last. I have my font weight, my font style, and my font variant, and of course I could do those in any order. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and add in the font size. So we'll make our font size 12 pixels, and then we'll go ahead and we will type in the actual font that we want to use. So I'm going to use Helvetica, and if that's not available, I will just take the default sans serif font that the user has installed, and I of course will terminate this declaration with a semicolon. I'm going to save, and if we come back here and make sure nothing is selected, I can reload the page. Oh, we never applied it in our, I need to apply my kitchen sink class. So I have my style, but I didn't put it on anything. So let's come down here to this paragraph and let's just go ahead and apply the class, and of course I named this one kitchen sink. I'll save my file and we'll refresh it, and there you go. You can see that it's now doing bold, italic, it's doing small caps, it's taking on the pixel size I specified as well as the font. So that's a really useful way that if you want to apply multiple properties, you can go ahead and do it in one declaration.